decided to move to Abu Dhabi, I thought, a bit naively, that setting up banks would be easy. However, what I have learned is certain things happen in a certain way in the UAE. And in this video, I'm going to talk about setting up personal bank accounts and business bank accounts. And I'm sure that from those lessons, you can save hours of frustration and lots of wasted dirhams. So I'm back from the school run. We've just rocked up to the games room. Albert, hi. Albert's just practicing before I absolutely kick his butt. And today I'm going to talk to you a bit before then about how easy to set up a bank account in the UAE. When I first moved here, I thought it was going to be super hard. And whilst there are elements of it that were quite tricky, actually it's a really smooth process if you know what you're doing. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the things to avoid and the pitfalls that you don't need to go down in order to make it really straightforward. And that's from a personal and business bank account setup. So what do you need to set up a bank account in the UAE? So first of all, Emirates ID. Without the Emirates ID, you're not going to open up a bank account. You're not resident, so it's just not going to happen. Of course, you'll need to send in things like your passport from wherever you're resident, along with a proof of address. Now, a proof of address can be a bit of a tricky one initially, but there is a way around it. So with a tenancy contract, you'll be on the register for something called the Tortiq, I don't know how to pronounce it, in Abu Dhabi. In Dubai, it's called the Ajari. So it's kind of like a platform, a government platform that knows where you are, where you live. If you don't have that, fear not. What you can do is you can use your short-term address. So say, for example, you're in an Airbnb, or in my case, I was fortunate enough to stay at a friend's place in Dubai. I used their address with their permission, of course. And that meant that I had somewhere for the cards and the checks to be sent through to me once the account was fully set up. Now, the thing about it is you need to be around long enough to receive it, and you have to physically be able to receive it with a copy of your Emirates ID. As I say, that's the gateway. You really need that in order to set it up. So it's not an issue if you haven't got a permanent address at that point, which many of us won't if you're relocating from another country, but you do need to be aware that you need a place to register your details for your bank setup initially. So depending on the bank, there are some other things you might need, and that might include things like 6 months of your previous bank statements. Now, I don't have 6 months of previous bank statements in the UAE, and actually the bank I went with were really streamlined and smooth when it came to an onboarding. But I do know that there are some banks that require a bit more information. They might request bank statements. They might even go as far as asking for your business accounts for the last 2 years of trading, for example. All depends on the bank. But for sure, if you're self-employed or you're a business owner, the onboarding is going to be a bit more extensive, and there's going to be more KYC, know your customer type of stuff that you'll get thrown at you from a compliance point of view. But it's all doable, it's all straightforward. Just be prepared to have a bit more information and documents saved to files, and make sure they're saved ideally as like a PDF and under 12 meg in file size. As I found that when I was loading up stuff, I had to resize a lot of files in order for their system at the banks to accept my documents. So now let's talk about banks. Who do you go with? Who do you want to bank with? In my case, I'm going to talk about Mashreq Neo. So I went with Mashreq Neo purely because it was the easiest, if I'm being brutally honest. The onboarding was super easy and it was all online. So I didn't have to physically go to a branch. I didn't have to physically go and have any meetings. Everything was online based. And for me, that was really important. I needed speed. I didn't have a huge amount of time in Dubai, and I didn't want to be faffing around, queuing up in banks or having appointments to go and set things up. So that worked for me. And Mashreq, I have to say, I've got them for both personal and business, and they've been brilliant to bank with. I've got literally no qualms about recommending them at all to anyone else, if speed and online is your thing. And then you've got FAB, which I think stands for First Abu Dhabi Bank, would make sense. I hear they're very good. I hear they've got a strong global network. And then you've got ADCB, Abu Dhabi Commercial Bank, allegedly offer great remittance rates, and allegedly you can negotiate those rates. And the final one you'll hear a lot and you'll see about is Emirates NBD. Now, this account is brilliant if you're based in Dubai in particular, but they do have a complete reach across the whole of the UAE. And for business banking, I can only really speak of Mashreq. So for business, I've gone for the Mashreq Neo Biz account. And again, seamless. I have to say it's a really easy bank to work with. Yes, the onboarding for the business account was slightly more arduous and expect a bit more heavy lifting, but nothing out of the ordinary. It didn't take that long. and I can only recommend Mashreq again. They've been fantastic. The other options, of course, are some of the other banks that I've mentioned already, but again, do your own due diligence, and it has to come down to what works for you and your business. I needed speed and online. That was all that really mattered to me. As you can see, Albert's bottled it, so it looks like I'm going to be playing a game all by myself. Anyhow, so what are we talking about in terms of timescales to set up a bank account over here? For me, it was a same-day activation. Don't take the balls. What's he doing? Anyway, for me, it was a literally same-day activation. I had all my paperwork, so as long as your paperwork is sound, it's pretty straightforward. And the same goes for getting your bank card and your credit cards or your checkbook sent through to you on your nominated address that I talked about earlier. Super straightforward. And the cool thing is when you get that request, they ask you literally when and at what time do you want your card and your checkbooks, etc., delivering. So you can make it work for you. And they are pretty tight windows of time as well. It's not like, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. It's 9 to 11 a.m. There's slots like that. So that was really good. On the business side, again, it was Mashreq. Pretty straightforward, not as easy. As I say, there was more know your customer stuff that you had to onboard, but the same story rang true. So in terms of got all the paperwork and all the onboarding done online, then it was a question of when and where do you want your checkbook sent to and your bank card sent to and at what time. So a nice window of time. It was so convenient. And as for the other banks, when I was doing my research into which one to choose, ADCB were coming out at 3 to 4 days once you've left the branch, and FAB was anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks. Now, I can't say that's a fact because I haven't banked with them, but that was what I was getting online. And it actually steered me more towards Mashreq because of their online presence and their speed of activation. So if speed and power is your thing, then go for Mashreq. If you want something more traditional, then FAB or ADCB. It really depends on your banking needs. Now the big one, moving money around. Obviously I moved to the UAE and I didn't have a UAE bank account, but I still needed to spend money, still needed to transact, still needed to do things like pay for school fees up front, rental payments up front. So what did I do? I used my Revolut account. I'm sure most of you at home watching this have got a Revolut or a Wise account, something similar. I'm sure there are others. But for me, Revolut was the one that I've always used and I'm comfortable with that platform. So straightforward, moving money into my Revolut account, in my Revolut account GBP, then transferring it into my Revolut AED, into my Dirham account. And that's essentially how I managed everything for the first few weeks until I got my bank set up with Mashreq. And of course you can do UK bank SWIFT transfers, which are incredibly reliable, but they are expensive. So if you have to use that, then fine. But if you can avoid, then moving money for purchases and ongoing expenses when you're over here, simply put it into a Revolut or similar account. And if you're sending large payments like rent or like school fees, try and time it if you can for exchange rate improvements, because just a slight variation in the currency can make all the difference if you're sending large volumes of money. So keep that in mind as well. And when I paid our first quarter's rent and agency fees, I did this through Revolut. And I was caught off guard slightly because when I sent the monies, I hadn't realised, because it wasn't clearly shown on Revolut, that there would be a receiver's end fee. That's not displayed until after you've hit the send button. And what this meant was that our landlord received the money minus the fees, which meant they weren't prepared to release the keys and so on. Same thing happened with the agency's commission. Sent them their 5% of the annual rent, that's their commission, and it was less the receiver's end fees. And something else that's really common and quite humorous actually is that checks are still a thing here in the UAE. A good old-fashioned check, like the ones you used to receive at Christmas from your grandma. But something worth mentioning here now is that if you're sending a check from where I was in Dubai to Abu Dhabi, you're going to need to courier it. You could send it in a really expensive taxi. You could send it via a courier like Emirates Post. No, you won't. They won't send checks. I realised this after messing around for about 3 hours, figuring out the metro in Dubai, going to different branches, being told various different things, only to go back to the DHL box when I first arrived in Dubai Mall and using their services. 160 dirhams for next day. Wish I'd have done that from the start rather than faffing around trying to use a different service provider. So the key lessons for me would be to open personal and business bank accounts together. Same paperwork, less hassle. If you do go with a traditional bank, never leave your branch appointment without online access. And try and avoid multiple smaller transfers. Try and do fewer larger ones. You'll benefit from the fees, and if there are exchange rate improvements, you can also time it around that as well. Keep multiple payment options ready, so have some cash, use your bank account in the UK if you have to, open up your Revolut, that makes way more sense, just have multiple options at your disposal. And most importantly, never forget to have your physical Emirates ID with you when you're setting up your banking. So if you're having it delivered to your address where you're registered when you set your account up, you have to have your physical Emirates ID. Not a picture, not a copy, not a scan, has to be the physical thing, because on that Emirates ID, there is a chip, just like on a credit card. And that chip holds all your personal information, and it's the only way that the courier will release that bank card or that checkbook. So without it, you're knackered. UAE banking isn't complicated, it's just different. And in fact, I would go so far as to say that opening up a bank account, personal and business, has been the most frictionless experience I've had about the whole process of relocating. It's really been quite a pleasure, actually. And for me, that's saying a lot, because I hate admin. So yeah, just be organised, have your options open, know what banking needs you have, and then go for the right partner. And hopefully, this saves you a few headaches and a few dirhams along the way. So I hope you enjoyed this. Stay tuned for more videos, and I'll see you next week.